So today we're starting with synthesis, and this is the introduction. You have a packet that's been uploaded to Google Classroom. Go ahead and open up the packet and go to this page. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, do not scroll down and look at the sources that are listed below. Just go to this page and stop. It's very important that we do this step by step so you can get the right mental mindset here on how to address this. So do not be scrolling down and looking at the sources yet. Okay, we'll get to that. So what we're going to do, this is a sample synthesis essay prompt for the AP exam. Well, this is actually a real one. It's an older one, but this is a real one from an older AP line exam. Now, so let's look at this one for just a moment, and then we're going to do a little bit of analyzing of this prompt page, opening cover page, whatever you want to call it, and then we're going to move on down and do a couple other things. So just stick with me, and let's take this step by step, and it will benefit you. If you try to shortcut some of this and bypass some of these steps, then you will pay for it in the long run, and I don't want to see you do that because students do it all the time, and it ends up costing them. So let's look at, I don't mean to be insulting to you by reading you the prompt, but there's some things that we need to make sure that we understand. The question requires you to synthesize a variety of sources. Now, what does it mean to synthesize? Have you ever heard of a synthesizer in music? What does it do? Somebody tell me. Some of y'all shaking your head, yes, so don't know, do you? You say, oh yeah, no. So, yeah, I know that. No, I don't know. So, a synthesizer simply puts different sounds together. Okay, that's an oversimplification, but that's what it does. Here you're going to be putting different pieces of information together. You're going to synthesize different pieces of information, different sources, along with your own ideas to create an argument. Okay? So think about this. AP exam has multiple choice and 3 essays. 3 essays are synthesis, rhetorical analysis, and argument. The synthesis prompt is just an argument prompt, but it gives you sources. Okay, that's the difference. You're going to have a variety of sources to look at, and we'll get to the sources in a minute. Here is the key. If you don't get anything else out of what we're talking about today, get this. Do you see what's in italics? Your argument should be central. The sources should support this argument. Avoid merely summarizing sources. This last part is like the death knell for many, many, many student essays. Way too many essays that I've read over the years, the students are just summarizing sources and they're kind of like saying, oh, well, here it is. You know, this source says this source says that, the other source says the other. So, you know, there's my argument. Okay, that's not an argument. That's just a summary of sources. You cannot score well doing that. And that is why I said do not even look at the sources yet. You with me? The key here is you have to come up with your own ideas first. Without any sources, imagine that you don't have any sources, but you're going to have to address this topic. What would you say? That's where you come up with the things on your own. Then you can look at the sources and seeing what they say. We're going to go through how to analyze them and all that kind of stuff, and how you might synthesize or integrate those sources as support for your argument. You with me? Step by step. That's what we have to keep in mind. Now, let's look at the introduction. Mass public schooling has traditionally proclaimed among its goals the following. 1, to help each student gain personal fulfillment. And 2, to help create good citizens. Pretty noble goals, I guess. These 2 goals, one aimed at the betterment of individuals and the other aimed at the betterment of society, excuse me, might seem at odds with one another. At the very least, these 2 goals are a cause of much tension within schools at every level. Schools want students to be allowed or encouraged to think for themselves and pursue their own interests, but schools also believe that it is right in some circumstances to encourage conformity in order to socialize students? Let me answer the phone. Yes? Okay. Back. Kevin Colorado dismissal. All right, now, let's look at the assignment. The assignment says, read the sources that follow. And I say, don't read the sources that follow yet. Got it? Then choose an issue related to the tension in schools between individuality and conformity. So what are we talking about here? The tension that's talked about up here. Individuality versus conformity. That tension always exists here. We want students to be able to express their individuality, but we also want them to conform. All right? So the decision has to be made on what do we do? How do we handle this? Now, we have to narrow that down just a little bit, and let's think about a specific issue, perhaps, that we want to address. Okay? Now, you might choose an issue such as dress codes, mandatory classes, or the structure of the school day. How many of you would like it if high school didn't start till 10 o'clock in the morning? Okay. But then again, you wouldn't get out till after 5 o'clock, right? And then you might have 2 hours of practice or some extracurriculars. Now it's 7. Now you got to go home and do homework, and you're taking 3 AP classes, you're juniors, and so you've got 3 hours, 4 hours of homework to do. So now what? Oh, by the way, you've got a job. You work 4 hours a day at the job. Now I know, I have had students, and may have now, I don't know, but I have had in the past, I've had students doing, juniors are always juniors, doing 3 AP classes, working 4 hours a night, and 20 hours on the weekends. That's hard to do. It's hard to do. All right, let's go back to the tension in the schools, all right? You don't have to choose an issue that you've experienced personally. No, I think it'd be better if you did, but you don't have to. Here are the instructions. Then write an essay in which you use the issue to argue the extent to which schools should support individuality or conformity. Synthesize at least 3 sources for support. 2 things there that you need to be aware of. Okay, you need to pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you. When you see that little term there, the extent to which, you need to change that in your mind to what I have here on the board. Under what conditions? That just makes it a little easier for people to understand. Okay, so write an essay in which you use this issue, whatever one it is you're going to, so you can argue under what? What conditions? Under what conditions schools should support individuality or conformity. Does that make more sense to you than the extent to which? Now the extent to which is going to probably be in the question. That's like every year that's going to be in the question. Change that mentally to under what conditions, and it makes it a lot simpler for you most of the time. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, the next thing is it says synthesize at least 3 sources for your support. We've already talked about what synthesis is, right? What does it mean to synthesize? We know that. At least 3. Now you're going to have 6, 7, 8 sources, right? You need to synthesize at least 3. Cite at least 3 in your essay. Now, listen very closely to what I'm about to tell you. This is not, you hear me? This is not a DBQ. Your goal is not to include every source. That is not your goal. I don't want to oversimplify, but I will. The DBQ, you need to really include every source, correct? Well, That's probably what your A-push teacher teaches you and something like that. So, I mean, like I say, I know this is kind of an oversimplification, but one of the things you need to do is, of course, include all of the sources. That is not what we do here. Okay, I'm going to just try to get this drilled into your heads because we're going to talk about this over and over and over and over and over. It's not the number of sources, except you got to have at least 3. That's the only thing that we deal with number of sources. Okay, so not DBQ. And we'll get more into how we incorporate these sources and synthesize these sources as we get into this project a little bit further. But I just want to make sure that we understand the distinction. Your sources will be listed like this. It'll have source A, B, C, D, so on like that. And it will have like author's last name or what it is, book cover, bell schedule, old photo, all that kind of stuff. So, and we'll talk more about this too, but I've already been asked 3 or 4 times, how do we cite these? This is how you cite them right here. Just use the source A, source B, source C. That's all you got to use. All you got to use, and we'll talk more about that when we're actually, constructing the essay, composing it. Okay? We're good on that part. All right. Now let's scroll down. Now we're going to do a couple of things here in the lesson. Now I've got in your instructions in there what you need to do. All right, you need to open the packet if you haven't already, make a copy in Canny so you can write on it. You know how to do that. If you don't, ask your neighbors around you. I think all of you have done this enough, you probably know how to do that. The reason I want you to make a copy is 1, so you can write on it, but 2, I think you want to save a copy of it on your Google Drive because you're going to turn this one in and you're going to use it again tomorrow in class. So if you don't make a copy to turn in to me, then, if you just write on that one and turn it in, if I don't get it graded and back to you before tomorrow morning, then you can't use it. You have to go through the whole process again. You with me? It makes sense? So, if that's confusing, don't worry about it. We'll walk you through it here in just a minute when I get finished recording. All right? But I think most people can zip right through that. So we want to do this part. Look at some of the words that are up there in that prompt, in that cover page, the prompt page. See any words up there that you might want to use synonyms for? Especially which one? What kind of essay is this? What? Synthesis. All right? So you need to write out for yourself. What is synthesis? Going down here, 2 most important aspects of the introduction. What are they? And then paraphrase the introduction. That's the introduction section. Then go to the assignment. And this is important. There are 2 things in the assignment. You have the explicit task. That's what it tells you what to do. Exactly what to do. And then we have the implicit. That means, what do I have to do in order to do the explicit task? Implicit means it's implied. For instance, if you get home this afternoon and one of your parents says, hey, I need you to weed eat the back fence. Okay? That is your explicit task. Correct? Weed eat the back fence. Okay? What is implied in this? Well, it's implied, number 1, you got to get the weed eater out of the garage or the building, put some gas in it, maybe put some new string on it. Right? But there are several things that you have to do in order to do the explicit task. The things that you have to do before you do this, or to prepare to do this, are the implicit tasks. So we're going to be focusing today and on tomorrow probably on the implicit tasks. Your explicit task is simply to write an essay. Right? Synthesize 3 sources. But the implicit tasks, the things we do before we write the essay, are the things that are really important. Okay? because they will determine how successful we are on the explicit task. You've got to do the work before you do the work. The work you do before you actually compose the essay will determine how well written the essay is and how you're going to score it. That should go without saying, however, it doesn't always. Some people just want to jump right in and start writing. And that is rarely a successful strategy. Just throwing that out. All right, so those three. The next part of our assignment, if you're scrolling down, ask you some questions. All right, this is activity 2. This is activity 2. Today we're doing activities 1 and 2. So, just some guiding questions to get you thinking. How do schools address conformity? In other words, what are some of the things that the schools do now to encourage conformity? Right? Describe them. Drop down here. Well, okay. We'll go ahead and do this. Identify the pros and the cons of that one thing that you've picked. Right? Then we'll go down here. How do schools support individuality? What is one thing they do to encourage individuality? Talk about the pros and cons of that. Then number 5, as a student, what are the largest issues at stake in this topic? In other words, what's the big deal? Okay? From your perspective as a student, how schools address conformity and individuality, why is that a big deal to you? Why should it be a big deal to you as a student? Why is it a big deal to parents? Why is it a big deal to teachers? Why is it a big deal to administrators? Right? You need to think about these. Different audiences, different points of view, different perspectives. Just because you look at something one way doesn't mean it looks that way to everybody else. Before you can construct an argument that addresses the needs and concerns of a broader audience, excuse me, you have to think about who that audience is and what are their concerns. Does that make sense? That's what we're talking about. Getting choked up. That salad dressing was really strong today. Woo! Like they said, it was ranch, but I don't know what ranch it came from. Maybe one in Colorado or something. It's getting me all choked up. I don't know. Anyway, so this is where we are. All right. What are the issues? And what are the different perspectives on those issues? These are the things that we need to accomplish today. Now we've got about a half an hour left. So you need to get these accomplished today. Right? And here is the good part. You can work together on this. Right? You can work with a partner, numerous partners, a whole class. Have a whole class discussion if you want. It's fine with me. I want to hear different perspectives being discussed though. You with me? All right, now, before I cut you loose, what questions do you have for me? None? That's hard to believe. I know as soon as I turn this camera off, you'll have questions. That's okay. Yes, go ahead.
On activity 1, when it says create a list of synonyms, how many for each word do you think we need to have?
1 or 2.
Okay.
Just 1 or 2. And there are just a few words that really need synonyms. So just 1 or 2.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Anything else? By the way, if other people will be watching this, they say, oh, I know where that is. This whole packet that you have, if you looked at the first page, is put out by NMSI, National Math and Science Initiative.
Math and Science.
National Math and Science Initiative, yes. What?
But this is English.
You're right, it is English, because English is important to all of those. Without English, none of those others really matter. Okay? And so before COVID, this is where I talked to you about that I traveled around doing consulting work all over the country, teaching this stuff. This is the stuff that we used to teach. There are dozens of these different ones for different levels and stages and all that kind of stuff. So these are produced by NMSI. I'm allowed to use them. They're copyrighted materials. A lot of people aren't allowed to use them. I'm allowed to use them because I am an IMSI consultant. So for those of you who are watching at home, or you think, sometimes other teachers watch these videos and they say, oh, where did he get that? That's where I got it. Okay, I'm allowed to use all of it, have access, free reign with all of it. Okay. So no, I didn't create this, but it's good stuff, and that's why we're using it. All right. Okay, carry on.